make a start if we can. So, welcome to members and the public to this meeting of the North Yorkshire Council Skipton and Ripon Area Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Nathan Hull, Chair of this committee, and the Vice Chair is Councillor Andy Brown, who is just sat at the desk in front of me there. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being audio recorded and will be made publicly available in the next few days on the Council's website. Recording is allowed at Council Committee meetings. I've not been notified that anyone has contacted Democratic Services that they would wish to record the meeting today. Is anybody in the room here going to make a recording today? So could you please let us know now? Lots of heads being shook. Okay, thank you. In terms of housekeeping, please ensure that mobile phones are turned on silent or switched on altogether. I've not been aware that we're going to have a fire alarm test this afternoon, so if the fire alarm does sound, could you please make your way by the nearest fire exit in Gazette, in the main square at the front of these offices. The officers in attendance today to support this meeting are Stuart Mills, who's Development Management Team Manager, Andrew Muscroft, who's a Development Management Team Manager, Emma Walsh, who's the Case Officer for items 4 and 5, Daniel Child, who's the Case Officer for item 6, Kate Lavelle, who's the Solicitor who's here to keep us all in check, and Vicky Davies and Stephen Lowe from Democratic Services. So, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Vicky, have we received any apologies for absence today? I can't see that we have. I think we've got a full house.
No apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, so agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday the 3rd of December 2024. The minutes of the meeting are on pages 5 to 10 of the agenda. Does anyone have any comments to make on the minutes? Councillor Brown then.
I mean, just one, it's not easy recording a complicated long meeting and getting the balance right. I just thought the comments made by Councillor Simon Myers, the balance of those I thought was more neutral or against, and came across as more in favour. So obviously the transcript will do it. I'm not asking for a change. I think the member of the public had some degree of point in pointing that out to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. We've been receiving, or I've received emails from a lady challenging the minutes, but I don't know what she's challenging. Can someone tell me?
Vicky or Kate, or Vicky?
I think, Chair, she probably, sorry through you, Chair, she probably just wanted more detail putting in the minutes than we would normally do. We don't do them verbatim, we just give an essence or a flavour of what the discussion was about. And obviously, looking at her amendments or suggested changes, she's added a lot more detail, which we wouldn't necessarily include in our minutes.
Yeah,
so,
I've not been able to find those, what she suggested, but it's just about detail. Yeah, thank you.
I'm just going to let Kate come in here, then I'm going to let Councillor Heseltine, and I see that Councillor Brown wants to come back in. So I'll just give it to Kate.
Thank you. No, I just looked this point up in the Constitution, and basically no discussion shall take place upon the minutes except upon their accuracy. So what Vicky's saying is that the minutes aren't verbatim, but there's nothing inaccurate in them.
Thank you.
Personally, I am content with the minutes as written. The factual, as far as I can recollect, is absolutely correct. This person who's been contacting us, the way I read it was that she wished the minutes to put a different slant on the outcome, and I don't find that acceptable.
Can I move them, Chairman?
Councillor Brown.
Just to give Councillor Adams a degree of comfort, I mean, I read the email from her with quite some care, and there was a mixture of wanting the overall tone to be different, which, as Councillor Hestline said, is deeply inappropriate. And there were two areas where I thought that there were factual points she was making. One was she would like the details of the passing points to have been recorded accurately, and she was given, I think, a satisfactory answer to that around where she could find that detail, and I thought that was covered off. The only area where I felt there was any doubt was on the recording of Councillor Simon Myers' comments, which I felt might have not truly reflected the balance of it. But yeah, frankly, the full record is there, and I think the correspondence, I feel happy to vote for it.
Councillor Ayrton and Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I'll move them up, Chairman.
Councillor Williams.
I'll second them because I've been content from the outset with them.
Okay, right, so all in favour of the minutes? Okay. None against that, I can see. Councillor Nolan, do you want to in favour? I couldn't see your hand.
I'm going to abstain on that.
Oh, you're abstaining on that one? Okay. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest to declare?
None, Chairman.
That's nobody. Okay, brilliant, thank you. So moving on to agenda item 4, which is the application for planning permission to remodel the interior and exterior with landscaping and Studley Royal tea rooms. And so if I could pass over to the case officer to introduce the report. Well, thank you.
This is the full application within the site comprising the existing Grade 2 listed Studley tea rooms, the canal gates, ticket office, kiosk and internal pathways to the Hazelbees water garden. The site is located to the southwest of the lake, which sits between the Studley Royal Deal Park and water gardens. So that's the location of the actual site itself. But if we head across to the next slide, please. It gives a better idea of sort of where it sits as far as other key elements of heritage within the site. And the next slide on, please. Thank you. Okay. So it's within the World Heritage site. It also falls within the Nidderdale National Landscape. The proposal seeks to demolish single-storey additions to the existing building, to remove contemporary fencing and planting, and to erect a single-storey flat roof extension of contemporary appearance to the tea rooms. It's worthy of note at this point that this does accompany a listed building consent, which will be the next item on this agenda. The proposal would allow an additional cover of 6 seats with 60 internal seats. This is reduced from 88 seats from the original proposed plans, so the plans before you today are amended. The external seating would be reduced from 160 to 96 within that original submission. Thank you. So as you can see here, the extension would cover a floor space of approximately 450 square metres. The plans would include a reconfiguration internally in order to provide interpretation space, so that's to the front of the building there. And it would include the rationalisation of the ticket gates as well, in order to for the easy access to the Fountains Abbey water gardens. The ticket gate would serve as the entrance to the tea rooms and the interpretation space, and would be available to visitors to the paid section of the site, just for clarity. With regards to provision for those who aren't visiting the site, it's noted that there is planning consent granted to for the partial conversion of the toilet block within the lakeside car park that we parked in this morning for members who visited. Which would provide refreshments to those using the Deer Park who whoever who are not accessing the park themselves. Alternatively, the main visitor centre at the other side of the World Heritage Site is available to the public too. Fabulous, that's great, the elevation is fabulous. So the extension itself would be finished in a lime render in a natural finish with a seamless LED veranda covered seating area around its external. The extension itself would have a green roof and there would be oak fenestration sort of frames to the doors. The single-storey projection, as you can see, would extend below the first floor windows of the existing tea rooms. With regards to the policy surrounding this application, the proposal is outside of the development limits for Ripon and Studley Roger, and as such there is a presumption against development where it's not expressly supported by local and national policy. In this case, the application is being considered with regards to rural tourism and local plan policy EC7. Alternative sites have been considered as required within the criteria, and the application was supported by an alternative sites assessment. Sites such as the Studley Royal House and Banqueting Hall have been put forward and raised within letters of representation too. However, weren't considered to be appropriate due to matters such as accessibility, ownership, and there was also highways concerns, notably for the Studley Royal House. The proposal, as presented, would improve the quality of facilities within the site. It would further reinstate lost historical features such as the bosco or bosque planting. There's multiple pronunciations, if you see that same reference there. There's a pathway just inside the canal gateway which has been lost over time, which would be reinstated too. And in that sense, it's not considered that there would be an acceptable impact on the natural and built historic environment as set out within the reports. Furthermore, it supports the local economy through the improvement of touristic attraction, and it's not considered to create an acceptable highways or amenity impact, which is further set out, but within the context of policy EC7, that's why it's supported in principle as viewed by the local planning authority. With regards to heritage, the application comprises the canal gates and Studley tea rooms, which are Grade 2 listed and further set within the setting of a registered park, a Grade 1 listed water gardens, and within the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Fountains, the ruins of Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal. Designation was granted in 2012 in recognition of it being, under two criteria, a masterpiece of human creative genius and an outstanding example of a type of building ensemble or landscape which illustrates significant stages in human history. So it's within this context that the application is assessed. The proposal requires the removal of contemporary single-storey structures to the tea rooms and a kiosk. It would also remove modern fencing and the LPG storage tank. There would be the removal of trees as well in order to facilitate this change. The lodge building itself currently operates as a tea room, originally constructed in the 18th century as a single-storey building. The existing tea room building was built in the 19th century, circa 1860, in place of those tea rooms, but unfortunately does have these unsympathetic additions to it, which has resulted of touristic growth in visitor numbers to the site. The tea rooms building is considered under the same listed, so the Grade 2 listing is for both the canal gates and the building itself, and essentially there's a high number of Grade 1, 2-star and 2 listed buildings within the wider site of Fountains Abbey. The works include the erection of the single-storey extension that we saw on site today as marked out, and it would require the widening of the pedestrian access to the tea rooms forecourt, The extension would extend to the east, south and west of the original building, so we could just hop back to the site plan, if that's okay. Thank you so much. Fabulous. Yeah, that should be fine. Thank you so much. And it would require alterations to fenestration, resurfacing of external surfaces, replacement of boundary treatments. It also does include planting and landscaping works and the reinstallation of the oval pathway as discussed. It is noted that it's of particular note that ICOMOS International, who are a non-governmental international organisation who are dedicated to the conservation of world monuments and sites, and they support UNESCO implementation of World Heritage Sites. They had raised an objection to the original plans as submitted within this application. It is worthy of note, before I continue, I'll go into their comments in a little bit more detail, that on receipt of amended plans, reconsultation did take place. We haven't had a full technical review on the amended plans, and it was clarified with Historic England and the Department of Culture that those comments wouldn't be forthcoming as far as they're aware, so not to wait in terms of determination. The report indicates that the lodge has views across the lake, and that the proposal would be seen and has an important aesthetic value. However, the different actions carried out mainly through the last century have degraded this area, so there is recognition with regards to degradation. The technical review does indicate harm through the citing of the proposal and indicates that a modest extension would be more sympathetic to the building. They consider that the proposals a risk to the outstanding universal value of the site due to an adverse impact on the authenticity and integrity of the site. Now, a heritage statement and landscape visual impact assessment have been submitted. Amended plans have been received to reduce the scale of the proposal as received. The submitted documents do acknowledge the visibility of the site within the water gardens from the stepping stones as we viewed this morning, with longer ranges from across the lake, I should say. Now, ICOMOS do acknowledge the details of the submitted landscape assessment, which notes the landscape design and vistas as main attributes of the site, but it doesn't concur that there would be a minor or beneficial impact on development. Now, the amended plans do incorporate a landscaping scheme which does include planting along the balustrade and within the site itself, so the hide and reveal views which are associated with that authenticity and are integral to the architecture of the water gardens themselves has been incorporated within that planting. In that regard, the officer has assessed this alongside comments from Historic England, the Conservation Department and Landscaping Department, who consider that the views, while there would be visibility, it isn't considered to be harmful or to detract from the authenticity that attributes to the outstanding value of the World Heritage Sites. So in that regard, we consider that the additional screening is adequate, and there are positives to the reinstating of both the planting and the oval access within the site as well. Moreover, with the single-storey design, setback position of the tea rooms, use of materials which can be further controlled by the building, it decreases the visual prominence of the building within the amended plans. It further encourages vistas along the canal by putting the planting between the balustrade and the building, and which is more reflective of the historic home. So could we just go back to the which has been provided within requestable documents within this proposal. It's supposed to be reflective of the view across the lake into the site and painted circa 1750. So it would encourage views along the canal, as you can see, between the two fishing tabernacles there. As discussed, the concerns of ICMOS International Technical Review have been considered in consultation with Historic England, Conservation Officer and Landscape Officer. It's not considered that the proposal would erode the authenticity or integrity of the water gardens and reinstates lost historical narratives. Historic England welcome the changes and feel that the issues have been adequately assessed. As such, it's not considered that there is harm to the outstanding value of the World Heritage Site. However, the Conservation Officer does note that there is harm, less than significant harm, to the Grade 2 listed building itself due to the loss of a staircase and through providing access through to the extension through the loss of a wall. Now, there are quite a number of public benefits. Well, I'll go through briefly the main ones there, although there is a full list in the report. So, provision of quality of tourist facilities, interpretation boards, supporting of local economy, the resiting of a ticket barrier, which simplifies and streamlines the visitor centre, and the ongoing viability of the tea rooms. As such, the harm to the Grade 2 listed building is considered on balance to be sufficient, and as such it isn't considered to be contrary to Chapter 16 of the NPPF. The impact on landscape harm very much follows in from this heritage impact, in the sense that it is a World Heritage Site. However, it's pertinent to note with regards to landscape harm that it's within Nidderdale National Landscape, where the local planning authority do have a duty to ensure that the impact on the landscape is conserved or enhanced. Again, while it would have visibility within the wider landscape in the deer park, it is considered to remove visual detractors such as the existing fencing and unsympathetic landscape. The landscape officer does not object to the application, and there is support from the Nidderdale National Landscape Joint Committee, who consider that it supports the aims of the Nidderdale National Landscape. The single-storey extension is considered to have a positive impact on integrating the tea rooms into the water garden landscape, and on balance it's not considered that there would be harm with regards to the wider landscape within the Nidderdale National Landscape. Due to the distance of the proposal from residential units, it's not considered that there would be a significant amenity impact, with the Environmental Health Officer raising no objections subject to conditions relating to the installation of any ventilation. While the proposal would be visible from the public rights of way, it's not considered that the proposal would create unacceptable harm to the amenity of those using the routes. With regards to ecology and arboriculture, the proposal would require the removal of 7 trees and 3 tree groups. However, there would be a planting of 13 trees and approximately 182 square metres of hedging. It's noted that there are no arboricultural or ecological objections subject to conditions. With regards to highways impact, the proposal does not seek to alter the car parking provision or vehicular access within the application, and while there would be an alteration to the seating capacity of the tea rooms and improvement to the ticket gate system, the submitted documents outline that this is in response to existing visitor numbers and doesn't try to encourage additional visitors, but to improve the existing visitor experience. As such, and on balance, it's considered that there's not going to be an acceptable impact on highways in this sense. Lastly, with regards to flood risk, the proposal is within flood risk 2 and 3 within sections of the site, and the proposal is supported by a flood risk assessment. The proposal does involve an extension to an existing 2-room and would not alter the use of that, which would be considered a less sensitive use. On consideration of the internal finished floor levels being above the flood risk levels and including that 10% margin to account for climate change and mitigation measures, raising electrical sockets with regards to construction methods, and alongside a warning system to the site to alert people to potential flood. The proposal is considered to meet the test of the NPPF. So, in this regard, the case officer doesn't find that the proposal is contrary to national and local policy in that regard and does recommend approval. I do have some updates if it's okay for me to go through those. Is that okay? Thank you so much. So there have been 4 letters of representation received from 3 members of the public since the publication of the application. The themes surround concerns with regards to investment of funds and alternative potential investments. And this is linked with regards to an indication of an alternative siting of the visitors centre within the woodland above the site. However, it's not clear exactly where it may be that they're referencing the banqueting hall, in which case that is assessed within the officer's report and has been considered not to be viable. Again, there's an indication that Studley Royal House would be a preferable location with traffic taken through the Lindrick Gate, but it's not within the ownership of the National Trust. This is not the application that has been presented. The World Heritage Management Plan makes specific reference to improvements to the existing food and beverage facilities and references improvements to accessibility, provision of interpretation to the existing 2 rooms, quite specifically within that World Heritage Site Management Plan. Another comment raised was with regards to concerns to the existing car park's appearance and potential sprawl. However, as raised, this proposal does not seek to make any amendments to the car park, and it isn't perceived that there would be an increase in parking requirement as a result of this proposal. Further comment relates to proposed interpretation should be improved. However, the details of the interpretation haven't been confirmed at this stage. There is room for evolution of that through the National Trust as it goes through the process. The permission is granted. A further comment relates to the outstanding universal value of a World Heritage Site cannot be outweighed by wider benefits. However, local and national policy in relation to heritage balance have been applied within the officer's report and are set out. Lastly, as far as updates from letter of representation goes, the submission of a judicial review was provided, which quashed planning consent based on the omission of an assessment relating to the duty of the local planning authority with regards to section 245 of the levelling up.
Levelling Up Regeneration Act.
Thank you, sorry. Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. This sets out that in exercising or performing any functions in relation to or as to affect land in an area of natural beauty in England, the relevant authority other than a devolved Welsh authority must seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the outstanding natural area of outstanding natural beauty. This assessment is clearly set out within the officer's report. However, we'll clearly go through that with the listed building application that it is considered there too. I believe that covers everything within the letters of representation. The last update with regards to this application is it has been pointed out that while we have clearly taken the objectives of the World the Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal World Heritage Site Management Plan into consideration. It isn't directly referenced within the report, so by way of an update, I'd like to add that within the documents for consideration. This clearly has been considered, it's clearly referenced within quite a letter of consultation, but just by way of absolute clarity, that is it has been considered in that sense. And just so you've got the context of that, this document clearly specifies the vision for the wider site. It points towards a need for upgrading of this site specifically, references the requirement for an extension, and references a need for an update to food and beverage facilities within the wider site. It does go into quite a lot of detail with regards to how it seeks to improve sort of the feeling of arrival once the canal gates that the canal gates once had, and the engagement of visitors, and a need for improved accessibility and interpretation. In that sense, we feel that the proposal meets the objectives, but that's it by way of updates. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you for your comprehensive report. That's very good. Does anybody have any questions for them? Okay, Councillor Brown first.
Just one, the sort of energy statement side of it. Could you outline the gains in terms of reductions in CO2 and that side of the application? Because I couldn't see that in the report.
First of all, just to give Emma a bit of a breather there as well. But there's a few things to mention with this. I mean, one of the things that we showed you was the overhanging eave design of the green roof of the building, which has been designed with adaptation to warming climate in mind. So, as well as providing external shade for visitors, the eaves are intended to provide shade to reduce the solar gain, so that the building doesn't overheat, and therefore contributes to passive ventilation strategy, so that there's less reliance on active cooling in order to reduce overall energy usage. There's also going to be air source heat pump, induction hob as well, and insulation of the walls, roofs and floors to help reduce thermal heat loss. The green roof we've highlighted as well, so there'll be various benefits from that in terms of cooling, insulation, rainwater runoff as well as other benefits obviously as well in respect of biodiversity and air quality as well. I understand as well that also with the construction materials that they're proposing to use carbon efficient materials there, and we have been provided with some detailed figures on carbon emissions, which are obviously quite detailed in terms of what the numbers are, but it's intended to be designing for where we're going to look at as we go towards in the future. So there's quite a few things there, I think, which have been sort of integral to the design really, and featuring it in terms of trying to improve the environmental impact. And obviously we're looking as well with this project as well at reusing and extending an existing building that's there, rather than looking to do it with something else that's new.
Thank you. And the only thing I'd come back and say, it would be really helpful if we could have that as a standard set of paragraphs in the report, so I don't have to keep asking the question.
Yeah, fair comment.
Anybody else have any questions? No? Nobody else? Okay, right, so we have two speakers that are going to address us today. We have Peter Goodwin, who's an objector, who's going to speak first. Goodchild, sorry. Goodwin? Goodchild. Is it Mr. Goodchild? Sorry, Goodwin. So just before Mr. Goodchild speaks, we'll have somebody for the applicant afterwards, who is Justin Scully. Ordinarily, we allow speakers 3 minutes to address us, but because both speakers are going to address us on this application and the listed building application, we've made an exception here. We're going to allow each speaker to speak 6 minutes now, but then they won't be speaking when it comes to the next application. So you have 6 minutes to speak from when you start speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak for 2 consecutive sessions. That makes sense. My name is Peter Goodchild, and I have some 50 years of experience in the conservation of historic parks and gardens, both at home and abroad. And I'm speaking on my own behalf, although I am a member of various organisations that have specialist interest in this subject. Now, I've studied the officer's report that accompanies this agenda item, and I strongly disagree that the planning permission for these applications should be granted or determined now. It needs to be postponed until such time as a full and properly balanced investigation has been carried out into whether they comply with the World Heritage Convention and its associated documents concerning World Heritage sites. I'm far from convinced that they do. The UK is signed up to the World Heritage Convention under which the World Heritage sites operate. Now, a World Heritage Site designation is the highest international accolade for a heritage site. It signals that the place in question is of outstanding universal value. That's the technical term for it. And this, in a worldwide context, it is of exceptional importance and must be treated as such. Now, in the case of Studley Royal, it has been designated because of the historical and the historical aesthetic cultural values of the garden, the park, and the landscape, together with the ruins of Fountains Abbey. It is not designated for the Abbey alone. It is both. And that relationship is very important. Now, the official aims of the Convention, and therefore of World Heritage Sites, these are the official words: the identification, the protection, the conservation, the presentation, and the transmission to future generations of cultural and natural heritage of outstanding universal value. It is to be noted that they do not include the promotion of tourism. Indeed, it's well known that tourism can be a source of significant problems for World Heritage Sites. Neither does it refer to visitor facilities, which, although they are important, are not a main consideration, but take a second place in this context. Now, both the initial and the present revised proposals for both inside and outside of the Studley Lodge tea room, despite 1 or 2 conservation gains, and despite the reduction in size of the revised scheme, they are significantly out of character with their historical context. Now, they would both cause major and unnecessary damage to the historical and aesthetic character of an integral and very important part of a World Heritage Site, and also of the reasons why it has been designated. Now, the essential character of this World Heritage Site is from the 18th and 19th centuries. The proposals will introduce an unnecessary and alien 21st century element into this part of it that does not belong to the main period of interest, and it will be a very strong and uncomfortable contrast with it. Now, I'll be happy to provide a further explanation of this. The interpretive display, which is proposed, I think would be much better located at the main visitor centre, at the Swanley end of the property, where most people go. Now, 3 of the general context within which judgments need to be made about these applications are, first of all, the local, the national, and the international. Now, all 3 contexts are important, but the importance of the international context, I think, has not been adequately considered. And as a result, the rationale for granting planning permission is significantly unbalanced and flawed. Now, it should be noted that in addition to giving World Heritage Site status, UNESCO can also remove it, and it's already done so in the United Kingdom. Now, UNESCO's World Heritage Centre has asked to be kept in touch with the outcome of the Studley Lodge applications. Now, I would add that my objection is not based on a dislike of modern additions, but of inappropriate and harmful ones. I wish to stress that the proposals for the interior of Studley Lodge will affect the visitors' experience of the World Heritage Site just as much as the proposals for the area outside it. For the visitor, the inside and the outside are interrelated parts of the whole experience. Now, after the extensive alterations to the interior of Studley Lodge, it will still... Will it still...
Charles, you've had 6 minutes. Could you
just finish this sentence?
In 10 seconds, if you could, please.
It will still qualify as a Grade 2 listed building of special historic interest? What will be left of it that will qualify?
Thank you very much.
I have a written copy of my statement if you wish.
So if we could now hear from Justin Scully, who's going to be addressing us on behalf of the National Trust. Once again, you have 6 minutes from when you start speaking.
Is that okay, Chair? That's all right on the sound. I won't take up 6 minutes of your time. I'll speak mainly to the main application, and then I'll stop and just some comments on the list of building consent, if that's okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time this afternoon. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak to you. And we really welcome the officers' thorough and positive report on the proposals. I don't need to remind anyone here that Fountains is one of Yorkshire's greatest treasures, and it is North Yorkshire's only World Heritage Site. It's not only the jewel in the crown of Yorkshire's tourism, but it's also hugely important to our local community. My whole team of staff and volunteers take our responsibility to look after this special place super seriously, but we also have a responsibility to give our visitors a brilliant experience when they visit. And those of you with long memories know that the National Trust invested millions of pounds in creating a visitor centre in the 90s, alongside the millions of pounds we've spent and continue to spend on the conservation of the estate. This project is absolutely not about recreating that visitor centre. In fact, it's been our intention to improve the landscape and the facilities at the Studley end of the estate since the visitor centre was built. And as you also said, this intention is of course reflected in our World Heritage Management Plan, which we consulted broadly on last year, which particularly emphasised the way this project will improve interpretations of the gardens and the wider estate. The local community and the consultees agreed with the need to deal with long queues, woeful appearance, and frankly terrible toilets. There is only one toilet at that end of the estate that isn't upstairs. This listed building has seen piecemeal changes over the year, and frankly it doesn't even begin to serve our visitors in a way we would all expect of this brilliant place. This design of this project is absolutely of the highest quality, and as you asked, the building will significantly reduce our carbon emissions with the introduction of air source heat pumps and induction cooking. We're insulating walls, roofs, floors to help with thermal heat loss. The green roof will help with this, as also being brilliant for wildlife. This project is for all our visitors. You know, whether you've walked up from Ripon or, like the majority of our visitors, you're halfway through your visit when you started at the visitor centre, and frankly, either way, you've had a long walk. Of course, this isn't just about sorting the basics of what our visitors expect. It's about providing great interpretation of the site and complete conservation of the area. And it's recreating the sort of lost wow moments of the 18th century that have been lost. We're confident that we've approached this scheme in a thorough and considered way. We've looked all the way across the estate at alternative locations, all of which impact the outstanding universal value. On balance, this proposal is the most accessible and least harmful. We've done extensive consultation and we've responded to all the various comments that have been raised. I suppose what I'm saying is we've consulted, we've listened, and we believe we've found the right balance. And I hope you can support our ambitions to sustain the future of this World Heritage Site and allow it to be loved by future generations. In terms of the listed building consent, very informal. You've seen the building this morning. It is much altered over time. Even the staircase isn't the original. We are altering it, but I think we're improving the function and we're obviously enhancing the appearance. And also we're kind of reintroducing the historic rooms of how it used to look, as well as things like the sash windows of the original design and the render. So I think my focus is on the main application. Happy to answer any more questions on the listed building consent, but that's what we'd say on the LBC.
Okay, thank you for your time. We don't open up to questions, but thank you all the same.
I'm not down.
Right, okay. So nothing further from the one to debate. Councillor Williams.
Sorry, it's not debate, it's a question, which is just that often when we have applications before us, we have an artist's impression as to what we're considering, and I wouldn't see you produce anything. What we've seen is what it looked like in 1750 rather than what it might look like in 2050.
You can just bring that up for you now. I've got some prepared, thank you. I presented the proposed floor plans and elevations, but yes, I have prepared the site photographs as well. I appreciate you might not be able to attend, as we did go around the site this morning as well. So just towards the end of the presentation is the landscape views, which gives an impression. So here we're looking at.
Could you speak to the mic rather than the picture, please?
Yes, of course, no problem. I'm trying to work out what. Thank you. Okay. So you've got the existing view as labelled. You've also got a 1-year view and a 15-year view as submitted within the documents, which on public access. I understand it's quite bright, so it's a little bit difficult to glimpse. It does show that the lodge has been re-rendered as well, so the lodge does look a little bit more concealed in that sense.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Williams, or do you need to see any other images?
No, I try, it's more for the benefit of members of the public attending than myself.
Would anyone like to start off our debate? Anyone like to say? Councillor Brown?
Nobody else will. I've been a regular visitor to this over the past 30 years. I've lost track of how many times I've been to the overall complex. And I completely agree with the points being made that it's a World Heritage Site and we need to make sure we maintain its authenticity and its integrity. And we shouldn't lightly set that aside by saying there's a commercial consideration or whatever. So I'm solely judging it on whether it's better after or before in terms of the aesthetics and in terms of the long term. I have to be honest, I think it is better after, not before. I think it's going to provide us with a better transmission to future generations. I think there are a number of organisations that I would have expected to kick up a lot of fuss if it was in any way undermined. The Georgian Society makes some interesting comments, the Civic Society of Ripon makes some interesting comments, parish council makes some interesting comments. None of them are dying in a ditch saying this is going to be worse after than it is before. Most of them seem to think, with a few details, it's going to be an improvement. And I was particularly looking at the glass extension and how that sat from the other side of the lake and whether that felt like a concern. And I thought there was quite a bit of effort to turn it at an angle, screen it. From three sides you can't see any difference. It's only across the lake you can see a difference. And I thought that was well screened and well set. So, and I thought the green roof, I mean, normally I'd have been asking for solar and that sort of, in this context, I thought that was the best solution that could have been given to do it. And I'm sort of sat there thinking, either we do nothing, and this rather squalid cafe that I've been to and gone away because the queues were so horrible, and that rather squalid entrance where I've been to and thought, well, thank God I came in from the other side. You know, you come up to, I came up today by that lovely drive, and you get to the car park and you walk to the entrance, and the only bit that's squalid is about the 20 yards where this is. So, frankly, I think it's an improvement on long queues and a woeful experience, and I'm going to propose approval.
Thank you, Councillor Bronning.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I take on board some of the comments that were made by the gentleman about the World Heritage Site and the fact that UNESCO can withdraw that designation. In fact, I come from the very city in the UK where that designation was withdrawn for the Riverview front. So I understand that. When I've looked at this, and I am familiar with fountains. I've lived in this area for over 40 years and I've visited it regularly, a member of the National Trust, done the park run very many times. And yes, when you look at the building in question, you know, it has had a number of changes. It's great to have listed at the moment, but over time it has had many changes and not all of them sympathetic. I also looked at the benefits of this. If you look at there's going to be some reinstatement of features, natural features that will create a positive visual impact, certainly from the lakeside, and any sort of visual effect, if you like, or damage is mitigated by that planting. And it's nice to see that there is going to be some reinstatement of the hide and reveal views rather. I recognise that there is some degree of harm, but I think it's massively outweighed by public benefit. I agree with Councillor Brown, that when you go into the cafe there, it could be better. Yes, there are queues. I don't think the building is used to its best function. I don't think it looks its best at the moment, so any improvement to the Grade 2 listed building is certainly a benefit. So I would like to second that motion that we agree to planning permission. Thank you.
Councillor
I listened with interest to the gentleman who spoke, I believe, Mr. Goodfellow?
Good child.
Good child. Yeah. And I've rarely listened to that vast amount of common sense from any member or member of the public for very many years. And I found myself, Chairman, believing and understanding exactly where they were coming from. What we do have here, and his main request was that we still await the final comments from, I don't know how to pronounce it, but ICOMOS, and they're the organisation that we should be listening to mostly. And until we receive those, then I don't feel to be in a position I can give it a fair judgment. The existing main structures on this site and the setting are exceptionally aesthetically pleasing. They got things right in those days. Okay, there's one or two more modern extensions which could be improved in a different way without this application. But to build a substantial new flat roof building is incongruous not just with the existing structures but the beautiful setting of the lake and the parkland. So I can't support it. I don't think it even addresses the principle of sound development. It doesn't address that at all. And yet again we're being asked, okay, the applicant required apparently 88 additional seats and comes across as a virtue reducing it to 60 to try and get it past the planning authority. But I just see this, Chairman, as another example of something that's so important nationally. There's only one Fountains, there's only one Studley Royal Estate. There's nothing comparable in the country, not even Bolton Priory, Bolton Abbey. And it should not be sacrificed on the altar of commercialisation. So I stand absolutely against it in principle, unless this organisation, international organisation, ICOM, OS, says differently. And we ought to await that.
Does anyone else want to come in at the moment? Councillor.
I'd just like to ask why we consider it not appropriate to wait. Is there any reason why we've decided to bring the report forward now without having that statement from them?
So ICOMOS were consulted as part of the initial process. They provided a technical review approximately 8 months following consultation. Reconsultation occurred and we sought clarity from Historic England as to whether they would provide a further technical review. It's quite often the case that they choose not to provide a comment again and leave it to the local planning authority to determine based on the comments received. We don't have a direct line to ICOMOS International, so I can't contact them directly, unfortunately. But what has been sent through to me has indicated that there will not be a response from them. That's why we've been advised to proceed at this point.
Could you just, for the benefit of me, remind us what UNESCO's stance on the application is, or the comments that they've made?
So they recognise harm to the outstanding value, the outstanding universal value of the site. So they recognise that there is harm. They haven't said that it would definitely lose World Heritage status, but they're essentially their comments say that they consider there to be harm. That is in relation to the initial proposal as submitted, not with the planting and not with the reduced scale of development.
Have we had any further comments on the amended proposal?
We have from Historic England who do not object and welcome the changes. Conservation and Landscape Officer additionally support no objections. The Garden Trust support, but the Yorkshire Garden Trust do not. I have summarised it within the report, though there are quite a number of responses, unfortunately. But as far as Historic England as the statutory consultee for heritage, they do not object.
I think that the National Trust have done an amazing job in protecting and enhancing the asset that we have on our doorstep here in Ripon, which draws many visitors into the local economy, and for that, I pay tribute to their work and to their dedication to enhancing Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal. My only concern with this application is the lack of clarity in respect of UNESCO's position in respect of the revised application. And I have greater concern about UNESCO's position for obvious reasons than I have with the ICMOS not coming back with a response, because what we have at the moment is an indication that they view the application as causing harm to the World Heritage Site. Now, to what extent they view that harm as being a reason to withdraw the World Heritage Site designation is the bit that none of us here today have any clarity upon. And it's that I'm concerned about, as to whether, as 7 of us here, acting in good faith, inadvertently do something which leads to the withdrawal of the World Heritage Site status. I have no issue per se with the application before us at all, and I hear all of the other comments from Historic England, etc., etc. But ultimately, the one body that matters in all of this is UNESCO. And if if it was to lose its World Heritage Site status, that would be a significant blow, not just to the site itself, but obviously to the local economy, for which we're using a policy relating to economic activity to justify the granting of the planning consent. It's just that lack of assurance that we have today that we could, as members acting in good faith based upon all the information that we have before us currently, do something which causes a significant problem later down the line. And I wonder if I could have some clarity in respect of that.
Okay, I'm just going to pass back over to Emma. Do you want to come in here?
Or do you want to? I don't know.
Yeah, just going to sort of, first of all, it's not UNESCO who've sort of commented on the application, it's ICMOS. UNESCO, basically, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, they ultimately, decide on the World Heritage Site status, but it's ICMOS, the body, the non-governmental body who advise them. So it's ICMOS who make recommendations to UNESCO on whether to do that or not. So the comments have come from, that we've referenced, have come from ICMOS rather than UNESCO directly. UNESCO themselves wouldn't comment on an individual planning application.
Sorry, so ICMOS act as UNESCO's advisors on matters such as this. Is that what we're saying? I'm really sorry, but I'm really sorry, but we can't take comments from the floor. I'm really sorry, but we can't take comments from the floor. So if you could kindly sit back down, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Councillor Brodkin.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I will speak over this gentleman because he's clearly not...
Could you
Excuse
please
me.
take your seat?
Thank you. The National Trust has a fantastic, and deservedly so, fantastic reputation for its preservation and conservation of buildings and sites in this country. And for one, I cannot see an organisation such as the National Trust putting at risk its status as a World Heritage Site. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, when they withdrew the listing of Liverpool riverfront, I think there was about 3 years of exchange of severe warnings that they were going to do so. They were crystal clear about what the problems were. They were very actively engaged, and there could have been no doubt about what they were doing. The idea that they're going to withdraw permission, recognition of Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal because we improve a cafe, I think is seriously alarmist.
Councillor Bernard.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Brown's comments earlier, that more recent one. It isn't a great change. He did mention that a lot of civic societies or those kind of groups are not dying in the ditch on this application. It should bring in more visitors, which will hopefully raise more money for National Trust, which essentially would be a good thing. My worry, as I expressed this morning, that through its success, a much nicer cafe might more likely head for this end of the park, which fortunately isn't well signposted, but the residents of Starley Royal might have some problems in the future, so we may, the National Trust may be creating a few problems in the future for the residents at that end. We were told that people generally, and I always were parked at the other end of Fans Abbey, as most people do, but putting a lovely cafe here could attract more people just at that end, especially so when I visit, there were some older people who specifically went to that end of the park and were unable to walk all the way to the other end of the Fans Abbey, so some people wouldn't have interest in getting to the Abbey. I'm disappointed in the lack of solar PV, but I think we'd have bigger problems trying to get this application through if I wanted to put in solar PV, especially over the car park or something like that. There'd be objections. That would be bringing bigger objections from people, so I'll back off on that one. Yes, so I'm more worried that it might bring in more visitors, but on the whole, to that end of the park, on the whole, I think as some of the staff pointed out, there have been many alterations to that building that we're talking about. It's not a great listed building built in 1700. It's not been changed. It has been altered over the years. So on the whole, it seems to be a reasonable option. And if you look at the third picture below, if you're on your little walk around the lake there, you'd barely notice. And it's only a single-storey cafe, so on the whole, it seems to be a good option.
Yeah.
Councillor Williams.
Can I just say that I'm sorry that Councillor Brown couched his remarks in the way he did in terms of describing questions as being alarmist, because I think it's perfectly reasonable for elected members to ask the probing questions, to have assurance before they cast a vote. And so I'm not trying to be alarmist, Councillor Brown. I'm trying to ensure that I have sufficient assurance before I cast a vote, which could be claimed to have long-standing impact upon the site. And as I say, I do support the principle of the application. It's just that I wanted to question further on that point, so that it has been part of our debate and deliberation this afternoon.
Sorry, Chair, fair comment, and I apologise.
Councillor Williams, is what you're wanting some clarification from ICOMOS or UNESCO or ICOMOS that this won't jeopardise the status? Is that what you're
no, I think I personally am now content with what I've heard from our officers, because I don't think we are going to get anything else. But I think it's appropriate to have had those questions asked so that it's recorded as part of the deliberation in the minutes. I'm not wanting us to be verbatim like the lady was requesting in respect of our previous set of minutes. But I do think it's appropriate that we record that issue has been raised and officer response has been provided prior to members voting. That's all. I certainly don't wish to prevent the application going forward today. I hear and respect the views of my learned colleague to my right, but I don't wish to go as far as Councillor Heseltine you would be suggesting today. But having looked at the issue and having had the responses, I think if they are minuted, I'm content with what we've heard today.
Would anyone else like to come in at this stage? Okay. For my part, share the concerns that have been raised, but just in terms of purely the application that's before us today, if we're considering what we've been presented with, I do think that there's benefits substantially outweigh the harm of doing nothing. I think we're enhancing a facility that's already there. When you go around the cafe in the entrance, at the minute it's a bit like going to Billy Butlins at Primrose Valley at Filey in 1979.
What's wrong with that?
Well, nothing.
That must have been a memory that's lived long in the mind.
I went in
If we went in 1979 again.
I went in 1967.
I do think that the benefits do outweigh the harms in terms of the application that we're seeing before us today. Improved accessibility for all visitors is really important. An improved experience for everybody is really important. If you've ever tried to get a cup of tea or a coffee or even an ice cream, dare I say, at this cafe in the middle of the summer with screaming children, and you're standing there for an hour and a half being stung by wasps, it's not the greatest experience that you can have. There are clearly economic benefits to the local community. And the wider Ripon area, I mean, Ripon is not purely a tourist destination. I know it has much more to offer than that, but it's a first-class tourist destination, and the outlying tourist attractions deserve everything they can to be enhanced, and I think it's a sensible application, so it's one that I feel that I can support today. So just in terms of the vote, do I understand that you proposed? Just remind me who seconded, Councillor Brodigan. So we're going to vote on the recommendation from the officer that the application is approved subject to the conditions that are listed before us. So all those in favour? Any against? There was no abstention, so that's carried by 6 to 1. Okay. Thank you everybody for your assistance with that. For those of people who are in attendance today that want to leave at this stage, they can. We obviously now have a listed building application, but before we move on to that, does anyone want to leave the room, or we're happy to continue?
Can I leave the room?
So if we could move to agenda item 5, which is the associated listed building consents, and I can pass back to the case officer.
Actually, it was 1957 when it's not 67.
It's all right. Council Hazeltine was there for the opening night.
I was there a fortnight ago on the former site. To be Airbnb.
The original Abbey.
Some lovely love there.
Eventually, Abbey, yes, after a while. Abbey has lost. Abbey rubbish.
All right, that's all good now.
I broke a finger on that.
Presumably we'll take the report as read this time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So the following item is the listed building application, following on from the full planning application within the previous item.
Sorry, sir, could you just... we're trying to hear the officer. We can't hear for you, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. To avoid reiteration, I won't go through the presentation again unless there's anything specific somebody would like me to raise, in which case please do let me know. I'm more than happy to go through anything. That will go for the heritage assessment as well. That is as reflected by the previous report, where the officer recommendation is for the approval. I'll move straight on to the updates because they are still pertinent to be included within the minutes. So it was just clarity with regards to the proposal is set within the Nidderdale National Landscape and subject to the duty of the local planning authority under section 245 of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act with regards to the functions of ensuring that the local planning authority conserve and enhance the natural beauty of the area of outstanding natural beauty. As set out within the full officer report, it's considered that the natural beauty of the national landscape would be conserved by this application, and it is in compliance with this duty. Additionally, I am required to mention as well that the Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal World Heritage Management Site Management Plan 2023 to 2029 has been considered as well, while not directly referenced within the report. This has been taken into consideration within the observations of the officer and is referenced within the report. So this will be added to the list of documents for consideration. That's it with regards to updates. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have any questions from more questions with respect to this application? Okay, so we've already heard from our speakers. So would anyone like to make any comments or start the debate with respect to this application? Councillor Brown?
Propose approval.
I second that.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make any comments? Okay, so I think we can just move straight to the vote now. So all those in favour of the application as presented, subject to any conditions? So that's, yeah, any against? Thank you, Councillor. Any
Strongly
abstentions?
against.
Noted. Okay, so that's carried. Thank you. Can we just we'll just take a pause for 5 minutes for a comfort break and to allow anyone that wants to leave the room to do that. Okay, thank you. Back in the room. We may start again. So, if we move on to agenda item 6, which is construction of 11 dwellings landscaping at Richard Thornton School, Burton in Lonsdale. So, pass over to Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been on the location, on the layout plan on the screen at the moment. We had the slides the last time. They are available if we need to refer back to them. But as members will recall, the committee was minded to refuse the application at the 3rd of December meeting for the following reasons. First, because the site cannot deliver any affordable housing contributions. Second, because it would conflict with local plan policy INF 3 due to the lack of public open space contributions, because it would not meet the required housing mix, and because the proposal would have a negative impact on local heritage assets. And so, notwithstanding the recommendation of approval, members therefore felt the planning balance fell against the proposal. To allow officers the opportunity to consider these reasons, it was resolved to defer consideration for a report to be brought back to a future meeting, which is the purpose of the report before you today. In an update to the report, as per the late information sheet, during the deferral period, 3 further objections were received, one of which is a repeat. Concerns raised include lack of affordable housing provision, concern over accessibility, drainage, closure of the former school access from the adopted lane, and the need to incorporate solar renewable energy generation. I'll come back to affordable housing, but in addressing these comments, condition 12 requires closure of the former access, and any breach of it will be enforceable. Drainage condition 18 includes a requirement for details of any outfall, and if acceptable drainage details aren't received under the condition, the development could not be occupied. And conditions 16 and 18 address solar photovoltaic energy generation. Now, during the deferral period, there have been a number of developments. First, notwithstanding the viability issues surrounding the development and the very low level of profitability, the applicant is agreeable to making a £4,038 contribution towards the Burton and Lonsdale play area or general open space improvements in the parish, as set out in table 1 of the report. Second, and very significantly, the revised National Planning Policy Framework was published in December 2024, not long after the meeting, and as set out at 10.58 of the report. Based on the framework's revised method for calculating housing needs, the annual housing requirement for the area has increased. As a result, the Craven area of North Yorkshire Council can no longer demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and the policies for the supply of housing are therefore out of date. What this means is that the presumption in favour of sustainable development under paragraph 11D of the framework is engaged. This is set out in paragraph 60 of the report, which is often referred to as the tilted balance. It's so called because the planning balance tilts in favour of improving development, and it is an important material consideration. Under paragraph 11D of the framework, permission should be granted unless policies in the framework that protect assets of particular importance provide a strong reason for refusing the development. And I would emphasise the word strong, because this is a significant revision replacing the former wording clear. It's made the tilted balance more in favour of sustainable development. Permission should also not be granted if the adverse impacts of granting permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework as a whole. And whilst the tilted balance does not exclude development plan policies, which remain the starting point for decision making, it does set a very high bar for refusals to be upheld on any appeal, and it's not enough for there to be some harm, some negative effects, such as some policy conflict in some regard, that the harm must be significant and demonstrable and outweigh the benefits. So moving on to the reasons members have given, in the situation where the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, concerns over mix and an over-provision of smaller units, in our opinion, is very unlikely to succeed at appeal. And this is especially so given that local plan policy SP3 states the council will be flexible where viability is a concern, as it is in this case, and where more smaller units would be desirable. In relation to affordable housing and viability, the council's own independent appraisal, which incorporates a review of the costs, finds that the proposal would not be viable with any affordable housing contributions. That being so, the exceptional circumstances set out in the local plan policy HC2D and the affordable housing SPD have therefore been met, and so there is no policy conflict in this regard. So whilst officers acknowledge this is clearly very disappointing for members and the local community, on this basis, and in an appeal situation, officers will simply not be able to produce evidence to defend a reason for refusal that the proposal does not deliver affordable housing contributions. I say this also because failure to produce evidence to substantiate a reason for refusal on the basis of the lack of affordable housing contributions could be an example of unreasonable behaviour and puts the local planning authority at a risk of a substantive award of costs. Whilst the cost consequences of members' planning decision is not a material consideration and should not be relied upon as a factor in making the decision itself, there's nothing improper in members considering the difficulty the local planning authority may face in defending any appeal. Members are therefore respectfully invited to reconsider their position on the main issue of planning obligations and viability with regard to affordable housing. On the main issue of heritage, the committee is not obliged to accept officers' professional advice, and it is entitled to exercise its own planning judgment and reach a different conclusion. However, the council must demonstrate on planning grounds why the proposal is unacceptable on heritage grounds, exercise the heritage balance required under paragraph 215 of the framework, and balance the public benefits against any identified harm. And from the planning practice guidance, vague, generalised or inaccurate assertions about a proposal's impact, which are unsupported by any objective analysis, is another example of unreasonable behaviour that may give rise to a substantive award of cost. And it is proper that officers advise the difficulty we may face in defending any appeal without evidence of heritage harm and clear reasoning. We'd like to emphasise that the housing allocations within the local plan, such as this, were screened and considered against criteria to determine their suitability, including consultation with Historic England, who has no objection to the application. And as the government's statutory advisor on heritage matters, this should be afforded significant weight. The council's conservation officer, who was involved in the site allocation process and who has reviewed the proposal, confirms they agree that the public benefits of the scheme would outweigh, as they put it, the very low level, less than substantial harm. Members are therefore respectfully invited to reconsider their position in relation to the heritage main issue. In terms of open space contributions, whilst the scheme is unviable with the full policy requirement towards off-site public open space improvements due to the low level of profits, as evidenced by the appended report, the applicant is willing to contribute circa £4,000 towards open space provision in Burton in Lonsdale. Now, whilst it's not the full contribution that would be required under local plan policy INF3, and especially in view of the viability position, this is nevertheless a benefit. Furthermore, as the report advises, there is an area of amenity space within this scheme, and it has very good access to the public right-of-way network. So bringing it all together in exercising the tilted planning balance as set out in section 11 of the report, the proposal is for housing on an allocated site and therefore accords with a spatial strategy for the area. It would also deliver environmental improvements in making effective use of a brownfield site and in meeting the need for homes in accordance with the framework. In the situation where the council finds itself where it cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, the allocation within the local plan and the delivery of 11 homes on the brownfield site in a sustainable location weighs heavily in favour of approval. Officers remain of the view that the low level less than substantial harm to designated heritage assets by way of harm to their setting would be outweighed by the social and economic public benefits in accordance with local plan policy ENB2E and framework paragraph 215. So in advising, we don't consider that very low level less than substantial harm would provide a strong reason for refusal in terms of framework paragraph 11DI. The Council's independent appraisal of the submitted viability evidence concludes the proposal would not be viable with affordable housing obligations. In the absence of evidence to the contrary, we would advise that significant weight should be attached to these independent conclusions with which the Council's housing consultee concurs. As such, the proposal would not conflict with local plan policy HC2D or the affordable housing SPD. The housing mix would not be objectionable in view of the viability position, a situation where the Council's policy states that it will be flexible. Against this, the agreed contribution to off-site public open space improvements, whilst the benefit falls below the level required by local plan policy INF3. However, the evidence suggests that the scheme would not be viable with it. So in the overall tilted planning balance, in the absence of any other harm, officers consider that this shortcoming would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when considered against the policies in the framework as a whole. And this is having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations and making effective use of land. Therefore, the recommendation remains one of approval, subject to the listed conditions in the Section 106 agreement to secure the financial contribution towards public open space improvement set out in Table 1, and to safeguard the Council's position in relation to any future phase of development on the remainder of the allocated site under a viability review mechanism, which would bind successors in title. And I'd just say in conclusion that we do have significant concerns about the local planning authority's ability to successfully defend an appeal along the lines of the reasons members have given, and we would therefore be very grateful if members would consider the advice given today.
Thank you, Daniel. So, questions for the officer? If I could go to Councillor Williams, who's indicated he has some questions on the Council now.
I've looked obviously at the viability reports, and I think one of them commented that they'd adopted a cautious approach to the valuations or something of that nature. So what happens, for example, if each of the units sells for an extra £5,000 or £10,000? Do we have any ability to have any condition on the development that surplus profit can then be part allocated back to community funds?
Some kind of clawback provision?
Yes, because we're working on the basis of cautious figures, which I accept. You know, I have no reason to dispute their validity. But if there is an extra £7,500–10,000 a unit obtained for these properties, then suddenly you've actually, all of that is bottom line profit. Yeah, and then it rather makes a £4,000 contribution to the Burton in Lonsdale play area to look rather modest as a result. So I'm just wondering whether we can have some sort of open book condition here that if we accept these figures at face value, that if there's a surplus profit above that, there's a proportion of it is put into the community gain.
I think one of the concerns at the minute is that the level of profit is so low, according to these figures, that how much can you allow for in a liability assessment? Is it 18%? I can't remember the figure.
Which I think the normally accepted figure, the lowest is normally 17.5%.
Yeah.
We're at 5.8% on this site, so it would take an awful lot to
take an awful lot to tilt it to a
viable
position where it's okay. So on a practical basis, could it be done if it was something we were minded to do?
I think, through you, Chair, sorry. I think on a practical note, I think it would be very difficult for us to actually achieve that. And it would be something that we would have to get agreement from the actual applicant himself. But based where we're at in terms of what the profit level is at the moment, I just do not feel that that is something that's reasonable at this moment. Hence why we do have the clawback decision, but that's when potentially another phase could come forward, which does allow the council that opportunity to then revisit, because at that point we would know what the build costs would be in terms of the developments.
I think my concern is that we do have a duty to decide the applications in a reasonable time. We've kicked it back, and we can only really go on the evidence that's before us today. And the evidence we have before us today is that, from a financial perspective, the developer, as it stands according to these figures, stands to make nothing at all almost. So the question is for me, is do we? Sorry, straying onto the debate here, so I'll rein myself and we'll come to that. Does anyone else have any questions?
Sorry, can I just say, in much of the same way as my questioning on the first application we heard this afternoon was to have clarity so the minutes reflect the fact that if someone was coming back 2 or 3 years later and were looking at what we were doing this afternoon, they'd be able to see that that issue had actually been raised and an answer provided, rather than me actually wanting to specifically proceed with a proposal which would prevent this going forward this afternoon.
Councillor Rowe.
I was going to ask a very similar question, but I still want to know the answer to, does it sit within our powers to require that there's an open book exercise at the end and to put a condition that standard policies on off-site contribution and affordability would apply should the open book exercise at the end reveal it? Because there can be quite a dramatic difference between the assessments at this stage and what happens at the end. I'm straying into it, but I just want to know, do we have the technical ability to do that?
Through you, Chair. I suppose it's very similar to the response I've done just a moment ago. It's in the gift of the applicant. We're basing the information we've done today on the report that we've got before us. There really isn't a mechanism to have it as an open book in terms of that for the council then to revisit it at a later date. As I say, the viability of this is incredibly low. It has been scrutinised by not only the DV but the quantity surveyor in terms of that. And in terms of us as officers, we've looked at this and thought that the best way to do that would be to include that kind of second clawback, but that comes into play if and when there's another development. So you're looking at the next phase to come forward. That then gives the council the opportunity to then revisit, because we then know what the build costs are. At the moment, we cannot do an open book situation.
So to be absolutely clear, so the answer is that we have no legal ability to place a condition that the real figures be used as opposed to the estimates.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Perhaps that needs looking at and addressing in the future local plan, where we can assess developments like this, where they're coming forward and saying that it's not profitable. Because the profitability of this site very much rests, in my view, with Hackney and Lee, who is predicting the sale price of them. And if they've got that wrong, drastically wrong, that profit margin can be substantial. We haven't got a crystal ball, but if we could look and revisit these type of applications when they're finished, and then assess the profitability of that development, and that needs addressing somewhere. Would that be in the local plan that's emerging? Or would we need government to step up to the mark?
Through you, Chair. That might be something that could be addressed in terms of the local plan moving forward, because the local plan in terms of the policy requirements is very clear as to what we can actually do and what we can't do. And if we want to go beyond that, it has to be in negotiations with the actual applicant as well. So in this instance, we are a bit limited, but going forward, we may well have that opportunity to do that.
So can someone feed that into the local plan, please, either chairman, or do we as individuals feed that in and ask for that to be considered?
I think we can do that through the Development Plan Committee, can't we?
Well, insofar as the Development Plan Committee is actually having any formal meetings, we haven't yet to have any of them.
Well, yeah, but it's something to go to that committee and some other businesses.
Yeah, Chair, sorry, I wasn't being rude in texting, I was looking for the plan practice guidance on my phone, because there's no Wi-Fi.
We believe you.
I've just been reviewing the PPG and viability, the paragraph on viability review mechanisms is very clear that there must be a clear and specific policy basis for any late review mechanism being imposed in line with the PPG, and I've read that there's been a significant number of appeals and case law reinforcing that position, where some councils have continued to seek late review mechanisms in the absence of a specific policy reference to it. And so I think the suggestion that the committee send a message to the policy team as part of the new local plan that's considered as a sensible one.
Yeah. Could I just question? Could I just question that? Because I think what I just heard you say is that you couldn't put such a review condition on unless there was a clear policy condition. And it is stated in the report that there is a clear policy condition about the off-site contributions, and that we're having to set it aside because of affordability. So I'm just questioning why we can't. I'm sorry to keep pressing on the same point, but there is such a clear policy in the local plan that says this will happen, and we are setting it aside for affordability. I don't understand why we can't then say we want to see the affordability at the end of the process before, as one of the conditions, that we will still set it aside as it stands if the affordability is as we currently know, but we won't if it isn't.
Yeah, I think, Chair, the viability review mechanism that is in there reflects the fact that it might be a multi-phase development, and planning practice guidance does suggest that councils can do that. Which is slightly different to a late stage review. Late stage reviews are normally for very large sites that are built out over a significant amount of time. I think it probably all comes back to the reasonableness point that my colleague made earlier. This is a small brownfield site likely to be built out quite quickly, and it would take a seismic change in the costs and revenues of the scheme to make it in viability territory for affordable housing contributions.
So just on this point, is what we're saying we've already kind of taken this into consideration through the section 106?
Yeah, Chair, we've taken into account the potential that the listed school on the other half of the site might come forward, and it would be justifiable to have a review at that point if that came forward. That there is a potential that were members to refuse the application today, that a planning inspector might not agree with that position. They might simply say, well, look, council's granted permission on the school for a care and education facility. Pre-commencement conditions have been discharged, and a commencement in works has been made in the demolition of the modern school extension. They might give short shrift to the suggestion that we have a late-stage review mechanism in any case. So it's worth considering.
I just wanted to clarify one point. In terms of the off-site contribution, which relates to the open space, that has been gifted by the applicant. It's because, as we know from the viability, the actual school is non-viable, so this is a gift. That's why we're kind of saying it has been offered, but kind of put it to one side in terms of the consideration. So it's just really to clarify on that point.
Thank you. Councillor Heseltine and Councillor Brown.
There's little wonder, Chairman, that we become more and more frustrated. This decree now that we in North Yorkshire don't satisfy the 5-year land supply, which we've always managed to do for years under previous directives. I can't see the public wanting to accept the figures that the government have put out, but they will direct at the end of the day. And that isn't just a diminution of local democracy, it's a complete destruction of it. The people have little or no say. The £4,000, no doubt, as a gift from the developer is better than note. Sorry, nothing. But when that developer, or any developer, under the criteria of how these things are assessed, is guaranteed a 17+% profit on the whole project, which is a huge mountain of money. £4,000 is neither here nor there. In fact, it's an insult to the community, an absolute insult. There has to be a mechanism, as colleagues have mentioned, and there are mechanisms in other planning authorities, not Yorkshire Dales. We can put a local occupancy condition on, even if they are the market value houses. It's a local occupancy, at least local families have first choice. And maybe that ought to be in North Yorkshire local plan. But the government has us in a straitjacket, absolute straitjacket. And personally, I'm beginning to wonder whether my time's well spent even being a member of a planning committee. You have so little say.
Let's go to Councillor Brown, then Councillor.
Still on questions. I'm looking at paragraph 11.7 and trying to understand how that sits with the answer as they've been given. Because paragraph 11.7 says,
what page are you on?
Sorry, on page 84, paragraph 11, or page 18 of the specific report, but page 84 of our pack, paragraph 11.7 says, notwithstanding the applicant's offer to contribute off-site public space, there would be conflict with policy in local planning INF 3 due to there being no caveat for exceptional circumstances to be demonstrated on that particular policy. Now, so I've got a paragraph telling me that there is no grounds for an exception, but that we have to set it aside because of affordability, and then I'm being told that we can't actually ask for a affordability review at the end, and I'm feeling a tension between those two pieces of information.
Councillor Ireton, then Councillor Nolan.
Yeah, it was just about the pre-commencement conditions, and I think Daniel said that they'd been done, hadn't they?
Chair, that's for the conversion of the listed school on the other half of the site.
Nothing to do with this application.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Chair. One question to the officer about, you mentioned sustainable developments. Are you saying this is, were you saying this is sustainable, an example of sustainable development? I reference, I think there's no public transport by this side. Are you saying, so yes or, was that a yes or no, was it an ish? If I can come back on that.
Yeah, sure. It's been through the sieving process as part of the local plan allocation, and its accessibility would have been taken into account in adopting it as an allocated site in the Craven local plan. Chair, it's relative, it's not served by a tube station, or but it will have a bus service, it will have has a continuous footway into the village where there are services and facilities. But as I say, it would have been sieved through certain sustainability criteria for inclusion in the plan.
Right, okay, well, it's quite a remote location, isn't it? I haven't double checked the buses. I think there's a comment from the parish council that it's not served by buses, but anyway. So my question then, it says in there there's a comment that solar PVs could be included. That it would be ideal for electric charging for vehicles. I don't see any evidence of even just basic water butts. I don't see evidence of high levels of insulation in those houses, significantly better than British standard. And some of the parking spaces are not impermeable, which worsens flooding. It is on a brownfield site, great, but I don't see it ticks many boxes on sustainability. And the other thing is, I wonder, are there any sites that you're aware of in this area where a developer's got hold of this site, which must cost them a pretty penny, but doing this size of development and has lost money? I would be shocked and amazed. So I'm concerned about the viability, as my colleagues have been.
I'm not sure that question has anything to do with the application. It's not one that
it's determined contributions, though, isn't it, Chair?
It's what, sorry?
It's to determine the contributions. We've been off £4,000 to.
Apples and pears a little bit, isn't it, really? I mean, all we can do is look at the evidence before us today in terms of its application. I don't think we can speculate as to what may or may not have been made onto site. I don't see
it's a gift, as I understand.
It's a gift. I don't see what bearing it has on the application, but if the officers are minded to answer that, I'll let them.
I will ask.
If you just want off the first question, that's fine. Don't ignore the second question. Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, I will seek to address.
Accept the chair's comment.
The first part of it. Within the application, there is a sustainability statement. It is a bit short in terms of that, but it does make reference to the fact that they will accord with the building regulations requirements. EMV 3 says that any development has to take reasonable steps in terms of addressing climate change. So part of the application here would mean that it would need to meet the requirements of Part L, for example, of the building regulations. That deals with water consumption, it deals with heating, it deals with the actual insulation of the building. So that's where that deals with it. And what it aims to do is to achieve that any new housing going forward actually reduces their carbon footprint by 31%. There's obviously further building regulations coming in later this year that we're going to drop that further. So in terms of sustainability, these buildings will be meeting that requirement. So they accord with policy EMV 3 in terms of that. In terms of the condition, there is conditions within the report in terms of the PV. Electric charging points, that's covered by building regulations, so we don't normally now put those on as conditions because it's a duplication of legislation that's already out there. But I don't, if members thought it was worthwhile raising an issue with an additional condition requiring the applicant to provide an energy statement, just setting out how they have met those sustainability requirements as set out in EMV 3, if that would be helpful for members.
Is that something that you would want?
May I ask for that, please? May I ask for that, Chair? If anyone wants to support that, it's fine. If they don't, I've lost it.
Councillor Brown, I'm also conscious of have we got more questions for the officers? Is this because there's no more questions for the officers, I think we'll invite the applicant to come and speak, if everybody's comfortable with that. Okay, so we'll invite the applicant to the board. Mr. Pratt, you have 3 minutes to speak from the moment you start speaking. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, everybody.
Could you put the microphone on so
that helps, does it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I represent the applicant for the school that was abandoned in Burton in Lonsdale, which we purchased in 2019, it being left since 2014. We entered this project full of enthusiasm, with the intention of leaving a lasting legacy and continuing the good work of Richard Thornton, who was the first futures trader. Well, he invented it, so I suppose he was the first, who bequeathed the school for the benefit of the children. The intention was to fund a specialist care home, which we're doing in conjunction with child protection officers. And this cost would be funded by the construction of a small housing development and the grounds around it. We had plenty of various meetings. The village's overriding wish was that we saved the school and repaired it for continuing use, as all other interests from prospective purchasers over the 5 years had not been acceptable or possible due to the school's poor state that it was in. The plans were formulated in conjunction with all of Burton Parish Councils and their original local plan application. The pre-application advice from the planning department at Craven, Historic England meetings, heritage officers, the church and of course members of the village all met in open meetings, and you were invited, as you know, to the 3 or 4 open meetings we had in the village to discuss it all. Our investment into the listed building has now preserved its future. It no longer has trees growing through it, it no longer has holes in the roof, leaning chimney pots and walls listing. In fact, every surface now that was saturated and mould everywhere has gone. It now has no rotting timbers, all the roofs are sealed, straight chimney stacks, new floors have been taken out, repaired and replaced, windows have been replaced, ventilators, all in keeping with the Grade 2 listed building. Even the sandstone walls are no longer porous. Unfortunately, all this culminated in a cost to date of 7 figures. The application being considered by this committee is not for that, it's for the purpose of funding the school, which has caused the problem. This is for a small village development of 11 houses around an open village green, continuing the community feel and at affordable level, enabling the younger generation to remain in the village they were brought up in. In fact, we've received approaches from three things so far, both young families and retired villagers wishing to downsize. The application was first presented in 2020, but due to many delays for a myriad of reasons, I won't go into those now because I haven't enough time, have I? But the profitability expected in the project has dropped over those 5 years, such that our original local builder in the village will no longer quote for it. The viability of the housing...
Could you just summarise in the next kind of 10-15?
Yeah. The housing intake has dropped below normal levels and we can no longer afford it. However, I started this project wishing to contribute to the village. And although the delay has probably rendered the school play equipment no longer salvageable, that's what I was doing with the parish council in the school, I'd still like the village to benefit, so I've personally agreed to contribute towards play equipment that the parish council has identified. And they gave me a price through your planning of 4,000, and to this end I would like to pay that, and should the application be approved, etc.
Thank you.
I did this more, but...
Thank you.
Thank you. Turn that off.
Yeah. Yes. So if we could move on to debate, is there anyone who'd like to start us off? I'm going to go to Councillor Ireton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm sure the few local residents around the school quite clear that they don't want the development. But I would imagine they also want the site tidying up, and they're fed up of living in a battlefield or a builder's yard as it is now. So I'm sure that out of the two, they would like to see this application progress, as I do. I am very uncomfortable about, like all members, about the lack of affordable housing and the contribution, meaningful contribution to the parish council for what they call the rec field, recreation field. These developments do bring tremendous pressure on small villages. It's added wear and tear on the facilities that they're custodians of. We've been told we've no option but accept the viability appraisal. But as I've said, Chairman, I would like to see something fed into the emerging local plan for North Yorkshire, where sites that are said not to be viable is an opportunity to revisit that and get something within the local plan so that the actual profitability of the site can be assessed at the finish when we know actually what that profit margin is. Because at the moment it is just an estate agent that's saying that. So I will move the recommendation that it is approved. Yeah. And there seems to be a conversation going on. Is there something else?
Sorry, my apologies. My only concern is what you're saying is something for the development plan committee is with things like that, there's a danger that we're slipping into the territory of planning game here, which is almost putting a gun to a developer's head. It's almost like planning permission is for sale. So it's something that we do need to address, but it's clearly going to be very complicated. But we will certainly, I think Andy and I will definitely take that up with the development plan committee.
It needs to be addressed, Chairman, through the emerging local plan.
When we have
a policy.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Yes, I'm happy to second the officer recommendation. I have to say that I think that we're going to sit here more frequently in the coming months and years ahead with these almost as a fait accompli as a result of Rayner's rural rampage. But we have no alternative in terms of we couldn't defend an appeal. There are no, and so therefore, with our hands tied behind our backs, what else can we do? I concur with David's view that there needs to be a look at this in the emerging local plan, and I wonder whether we could actually have that as part of the recommendation. That in approving this application, we ask the relevant committee to look at it in due course.
I think that has to be independent. It's the council business rather than planning permission.
But we will do it.
Right, okay.
Councillor.
Yeah, I actually think overall this has been a good scheme. I recommended, I voted for approval of it on Craven District Council when it came forward as a scheme including affordable houses. So I've actually been an enthusiast for the scheme, not an opponent of the scheme. But I have from the start thought that we need to see affordable housing contributions unless there's evidence. And the point's been made well that the national planning policy framework has changed, the balance has changed, and there are a lot of guns to our heads to say approve it. But I have to say there's one thing I disagree with on what I've heard in advice. I mean, people are saying we need to put a local plan policy in the new local plan. There is actually a local plan policy here that's very, very clear, that's outlined in paragraph 11.7, that says offside public open space contributions there is no caveat for exceptional circumstances. That's the current policy. Now, what I'm going to suggest is an amendment to the approval which says local policy INF 3 requirements towards off-site public open space to be made on completion of the last dwelling unless actual financial outturn demonstrates unviability. Because at the moment we're saying that we've seen some probable figures which leave a very narrow margin. But I have to be honest, in my own village I saw some probable figures that left a very narrow margin, and one of those houses is now going for £750,000, considerably different to what was available to us as the numbers. So I want to be confident at the end, but I accept it's unreasonable at the end if there's absolutely no profit to say you must contribute in line with policy. But I do not accept that it's unreasonable at the beginning to give up and say we'll just rely on estimates. I think we have to rely at the end on actuality. So I'll repeat my proposal. It's for an amendment. The local plan policy INF 3 requirements towards off-site public open space to be made on completion of last dwelling unless actual financial outturn demonstrates unviability. And I can't work out how any appeal could reject that as an unreasonable condition.
I'm just going to go to Councillor Ireton first, because he's had his hand up.
If I could perhaps hear officers' advice on that, Chairman, on that suggestion before I accept that as a condition. What I was referring to in the local plan was affordable housing and its delivery of that housing, where we need to try and link a policy in that they are assessed at the end when we know exactly what the profit is, not on open space.
I can't do it on that.
Through you, Chair. I think just to maybe provide some clarity, policy H2 deals with viability. It has the flexibility in there so that if schemes are coming forward and they can demonstrate via the viability report that they cannot deliver affordable housing, then we can deal with it in that manner. Okay. In terms of open space, there is no viability requirement within that policy. It's not written into that policy. In terms of this actual application, the open space is a gift by the applicant. He doesn't have to give it to us, doesn't have to offer it, but he is offering it to us. And that's why we've set it out as we have done within the actual report here. So in terms of the requirement of it being a requirement to visit that later on, there isn't actually any policy basis at all in terms of open space for that at all.
But could I just clarify? There is a very clear policy that does a mathematical calculation of what the open space contribution is and requires it, and there is no exception to that, you're telling me, on viability, and yet we're saying we can't condition it. It's not a gift, is it? I mean, I've never sat here and assessed the open space contribution and been told it's a gift given by developers. I've been told it's a policy requirement that's calculated mathematically. So I'm saying we should be calculating that policy mathematically, and I'm being incredibly generous and saying if we get to the end of the process and the poor developer hasn't made a profit, then we should set it aside. And I've no policy basis for setting it aside. The only policy basis I've got is for imposing it at the full extent, not at the gift.
In other words, is open space being provided on site?
Yeah, Chair, helps with the slide on the screen there shows a central green area, which is an amenity space provided on the site.
Yeah. So there's no
It's not
requirement.
play recreation, it's an open space on the site. It's not devoid of
It's on
open
site,
space.
yes, so there's no requirement, is there?
I don't think that's true reflection of the policy. I don't think
who's going to be responsible for its maintenance.
Yeah, I think just to help them, so I think it all comes, I hear what the councillor said, I think it all comes back to the planning balance and something that's less than ideal, that has some shortcomings, some policy conflict, INF3.
Balance ought to do it.
It has to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of approving housing on an allocated housing site. If you don't approve housing on your allocated housing sites in a situation where you don't have a 5-year supply of housing land, you're going to, I would suggest, face an awful lot of speculative housing developments on less than ideal sites, not allocated sites, not in main urban areas next to them, but not quite, less than ideal, but you know, that's something I would say is worth
We're facing a mess out of it.
Can I expand on that? Yeah, just to obviously expand on that, it is the tilted balance in terms of, and I do understand why it is difficult for members, it's difficult for officers in terms of this. And as Daniel has explained, this tilt is for members to make that recommendation based on the advice that we've obviously given. Based on what we've got in front of us, the viability report makes it very clear that this site, in terms of affordable housing and open space provision, cannot deliver on either of those policy requirements. Hence why we've got viability assessment. Hence why we robustly challenged that. We've gone back to the applicant and got them to agree to us to be able to revisit that should another phase of the development come forward for residential. And that allows us then to have another look and potentially get some monies back into the council, because we know then what we're talking about in terms of the builds and things like that. The open space, I take on board, Councillor Brown, what you're mentioning there, but as I say, it is something that the applicant has offered, because the viability makes it very clear that it cannot deliver the open space in terms of contribution. Just to be mindful of a situation we had probably a little while ago, which was a site in Conley, whereas it was a residential development, and again, it came forward as not being viable. We had agreed at that point to have the clawback mechanism within that. Unfortunately, it was refused at committee, and that clawback then fell away when it went to PINS, because PINS then just said, it's policy compliant, you've done the viability, you don't really have that requirement, I'm not going to take it forward. They allowed it, so therefore we lost all the ability to revisit the affordable element of that. That's just as an officer, that's just a little bit of concern that we just felt, just to bring it to members' attention.
Councillor Williams.
I stand by what I've said in seconding and I understand the sentiment that Councillor Brown is expressing, but I genuinely don't believe that if this went to a government inspector looking at the application as is, that they would deem that not getting 11 houses towards a pretty unachievable housing target didn't outweigh the issue in respect of the contribution for public open space. And as I say, I think that I am mindful of the fact that although it's not a material planning consideration, that we would end up costing the council more money as a result than it would get for public open space, because we'd end up losing on costs. So I think we have done the issue to death to a certain degree, and I'd like to move that we proceed to a vote.
I'm just going to say, you mentioned the costs, putting it again to your head. No one's trying to do that. You do understand that it's only to bring your attention to the merits of the case, merits of the planning considerations, that's all. And as we've discussed before at previous meetings, you just have to make the actual decision to grant or refuse in accordance with the planning merits. So please don't feel the cost is not into consideration.
Could I simplify things, Chair? I'll withdraw that proposal amendment.
Okay. Councillor Heseltine.
If you turn to page 159 of the papers, on the appraisal summary, looking at affordability and a reasonable profit, sounds like, well, the figure there, total cost, for 3,98126. Net realisation on a cautious valuation is 4,118,941, leaving a profit of 720,815. My opinion would be that the contractor could be rather more generous than 4,000. That's for a nought on the end.
And that's on the unit price of 374,000.
Well, that's only my opinion. It does cloud and colour me judgment. Tilted one way at t'other.
Does anyone else have any?
Well, sorry, can I just clarify, because on the basis of profit, that would be more than 17%, wouldn't it?
Does that take into account profit erosion as well?
Yeah.
Because
that's
the figures as of a certain date, then you have to calculate what's done or completed.
Yeah, which is why I'm just wanting to again clarify for the record that that's before we've started taking deductions off.
Just to say that I went through those figures fairly carefully, and I think they can demonstrate in the figures on the basis of independent assessments that no profits are made, but the assumptions about unit price are what I've so heavily questioned, because I think we're going to get to the end of this and discover that the unit price is considerably higher. 374,000 for a substantial attractive property in a attractive village seems to me to be very low.
Would you want the officers to respond to this question?
No, I'm fine.
You're okay with that? Okay. Does anyone else have any other contributions that they want to make? I mean, probably
Go to the vote, Chairman.
Well, before we do that, I'm just going to chip in and have my 2 pennies. I think clearly the advice we have from the officers is that there's no reason, or we can't put forward any proper rebuttal for any appeal. And whilst cost doesn't come into the issue, it shouldn't be an issue. We do have to make a correct decision today. So if what we're being told today is that if we turn the application down for the reasons that we've previously tried to put forward, that it would lose on appeal, then the correct decision today, regardless of any costs, is to grant the application subject to the conditions. Just on that point though, Councillor Long, you did suggest that we had a chat with Andrea about an additional possible condition.
Energy statement.
Energy statement.
Yes.
How would that be worded, Kate? I'm just throwing that out. Yeah. Because we have to have clarity on what we're voting for, so we need to know what the condition would actually say.
A potential condition could be that an energy statement to demonstrate how energy high grade has been applied and how the development minimises the use of natural resources shall be submitted prior to occupation for the approval in writing to the local authority. It shall consider the following: how energy use is reduced and minimised, in particular through the use of sustainable design and construction methods, how water efficiency and minimisation of use are encouraged, measures to promote waste, provision of energy, renewables, priority, making of allowable solutions, and we won't put the renewable ones in there because we've already got a condition, but something along those, very much along those lines, and it sets out exactly what the energy would be.
It's great, thanks. So, just going back, was it Councillor Williams that proposed?
No, Councillor Arden. We're both in agreement on that.
So you're happy to propose subject
happy
to
take
that
that
condition?
on, Chairman.
So what we're voting on is to grant the planning.
And after listening to your contribution as well. Yeah. I won't change my mind.
So what we're voting on is to
yes, he wants to drive it.
grant the planning permission subject to the conditions and the additional condition that we've just discussed. So all those in favour? Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so agenda item 7. Any other items anyone wants to discuss today?
Yes, Chair. Can I just have some clarification as to when this committee will actually sit and determine the cathedral annex application, because there is growing concern amongst the wider community that this has been rumbling on and on and on and on and never seems to come to any conclusion. It is a matter of some division within the city which will only come to closure when there is a determination of the application.
I'm not sure we can get that clarity today, given the officers that we have remaining in the room.
I think there has been extensive ongoing negotiations because of issues that have been arising, and I think that's what's causing the delay in getting the application before members. So they want to get it there if they haven't resolved all the issues involved.
Too busy with LED flashes.
Councillor Head, sorry, Councillor. No, we don't have the office.
No, I appreciate, but that's why I'm raising the matter formally here, so that it can be addressed and a response provided after the meeting, so that all members of the committee are aware of the current position in respect of that application.
If it's okay with you, Andy and I will raise it. We have a meeting probably in 2 weeks with both sets of officers from both officers, and we'll bring it up at that meeting. Then we'll just email everybody on the committee to let them know. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Could we have it?
Find a venue for it.
The race course, apparently.
I'm going to go to Councillor Heseltine, and then we'd like to give Councillor Ireton an update on the flashes.
I'm not. I just, throwing that in there.
Just misbehave.
Are we on?
You're on.
Could we have it confirmed then that the members of this area planning committee will be entrusted with making the decision on that application, and it won't go to the planning?
The cathedral decision.
Pardon?
In terms of Ripon Cathedral. If the application proceeds, because we're still at the stage where the applicant could decide to do anything with their application, they might withdraw it for all I know, but if it proceeds, it will come before the committee yet.
Area committee.
The area committee.
Yeah. This committee.
This committee. Yes, it will come before this committee.
And if it doesn't, me and you will stop.
If it doesn't, we all
So, if there's no other business today, and nobody else wants to raise anything, the next scheduled meeting is on Tuesday, the 4th of March 2025 at 1 p.m. We are unaware of what venue it will be, but we'll let you know in advance. So thank you everybody for today, for all the
Chair. Thank you for the egg.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. The egg.
We